Hello friends, and welcome back to another tutorial with me, Lisa Taggart. This one's called Marsh Poppies and it's a lovely summer scene. I absolutely adore poppies, so I thought we'd have a go at this one. So let's look at the materials first of all. To begin with, we're using this lovely set of soft pastel pencils. Our first layer will be using Dinkles. We've got Lime Divine and Burgundy. We also have Blueberry and Pine Green. And finally we have Deep Yellow, and this is our first layer. Stamping, we have Rainforest and Golden Meadow in the VersaFine Clair permanent ink. To colour in, we're using Posca pens, a couple of greens, a turquoise, orange, blue and a red. We're also using gel pens in white and yellow and a Stabilo Wall black pencil. Posca pens in white and yellow would also do. We have multifarious smooth card and a large paintbrush and obviously some water. We have the sparkle as well. Lavinia stamps, group poppies first of all, and then the wild poppies, and this lovely set of leaf creeper. So if you want to convert all of that into something a little like this, just keep on watching. So to begin with, we've got our pot of water, if I can get my lid off, and we're going to just sweep some of that water across the top half of this A4 piece of multifarious card. I'm taking my Dinkles and I'm going to pop some on my lovely craft mat. I have a hole in the lid. Now I'm just plopping this down. I have an idea that I want some light areas, so I'm just sweeping it and dabbing it across the moistened card. And that's the yellow. Next up, the Lime Divine, popping some more onto my craft mat and spraying that with water, keeping the card moist, just dipping the green colour into the yellow so that it mixes. And I'm thinking of maybe the poppies being against some banks. Next up we have Pine Green, and this is a lovely colour. It turned out to be a little more blue than green, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's like a turquoise colour, and I suppose I was just adding colour to see what happened, and this kind of changed the direction then. I suppose at this stage I picked up then a blue to mix in with that, and instead of having a grassy meadow, lo and behold the blue meant that it changed from just sky and grass to an area with water. So you just never know what you're going to get, but this is how it turned out. I'm just dabbing the colours together and then letting them run and blend into each other just to see what happens. So I thought, right, I'll work with this and change it into something. And then finally then I take the burgundy colour because I wanted just to add in some colour of poppies. And so what I did was I just dipped very lightly the end of my brush into the colour and dabbed it on top of the already wet ink and just let it bleed. And then I dried the piece, and there we are. It's dry and trimmed onto 7.5 by 6.5 inches. I've taken then my pastel pencils, and the idea using the pastel pencils at this stage is to, I suppose, fashion a background and to shape the landscape. So I thought I would take the light colours, that's the cream, the yellow, and in a minute the white, and just lighten the top of the picture. And I had a wee look at it, and as I say, at this stage I thought, oh well, it looks to me like there's water in the picture. So I've taken this like a bluey lilac colour, and I'm emphasising the areas where I think there's going to be water. And it's starting to take some shape in terms of the landscape. Next I take a darker colour, and I'm thinking at this stage I'm going to make banks alongside the water. So I suppose I need dark areas along the edges of the banks. So I'm doing that, and also then emphasizing the grass of the banks, taking green and sort of creating a rough grassy area, and all the while going back and forth, adding in water, adding an edge to the bank, and blending all of that together. At the front of the picture, I'm thinking as well, it's going to be deeper, and that's where the poppies are going to go, and I want to make sure that there's like a grassy edge at the start of the picture to place the poppies. So I'm just thinking ahead and seeing what I have, and using the pastel pencils to enhance the background. Now I've taken a deeper green, and I'm really getting to grips with the actual layout of the background, and I'm thinking there's going to be areas of water, and then there's going to be grassy areas, and I'm really just making it up as I go along, and having a go with adding some light and dark to the picture. And as you'll see in a minute, I'll just take my finger and blend it in just to see how it looks, and carry on going back and forth, adding little bits. That top half, I sort of thought it needs to be a bit hazier, a bit paler, so that it's going off into the distance. And there we are, adding the water back again that maybe was lost, and going back and forth until it sort of takes shape, and having a good look at it as well, and thinking, what does it look like now? What does it need? Does it need more grass? Does it need more water? And this is a lovely mid blue tone pencil, and I thought that reflects nicely against the paler lilac colour for the that I've used for the water. Now I'm taking a mid-green tone. Sorry about my camera, it doesn't like what I'm doing, it doesn't like me colouring in, and it goes a bit faded every so often. It doesn't focus, unfortunately, sometimes. Apologies for that. Now I'm going back to the areas that I darkened and taken like a navy colour, and I sort of like the way it was shaping up, so as I wanted to enhance it further by adding a darker tone, and the same for the foreground, and just blending it in with my finger and seeing how it looks. And the idea as well is that the background be quite faded. Now what I'm doing is taking like a pale orange colour and adding little bits here and there to sort of give the suggestion of other types of flowers or foliage, and just to add an extra colour into the mix as well. And now at this stage I'm thinking if there's any sunshine in the picture, some of the grasses will be yellow and a little bit paler, so I'm just putting little strokes of yellow here and there. And finally back again to emphasise the edges of what will be the little banks, and making sure that there's enough darkness, I suppose, at the front as well, where I'm going to place the poppies, so that it looks like they have a setting to be placed in. And I'm just flicking little lines here and there, because all of this adds to the energy of a picture. And there we are with the banks and the grass, and that'll do. Now I'm taking an orange pencil and adding some little highlights to the background poppies. Now these are going to be quite faded in the background, although they look quite deep at the moment. They will just be in the background. And now I've taken the red, so I'm mixing orange and red, just colouring in the ink that I already have, and then blending them out with my finger, just to give impression of poppies in the background. There we are. A little bit more orange until you're happy with it. and then just adding a few centres here and there. Now for the stamping, and I'm taking Rainforest, which is a dark green, and the largest poppy stamp from the set, inking that up and pressing that down at the front of the first bank at the front, giving it a good press. And I'll be wiping off some of the ink here and there so that there's a variety of shapes and second generation stamping just for contrast. And I don't want them to be too all in a row. So I'm working out what looks best and have some up, some down, some to the front, some a bit taller. And in this composition, you'll be sort of looking through the poppies. So next up is the smaller poppy, and just making sure that it's stamped at interesting angles. Next we have this beautiful bud stamp and the Golden Meadow ink pad, and this is a beautiful colour and one of my favourites, and we'll be adding a bit of contrast to the mix then, both in shape and colour. Now at this stage it looks a little bit congested, and the picture is going through what I would describe as the ugly phase. I think every creation goes through this ugly phase in the middle where things look a bit jumbled and perhaps a little bit congested, but fear not, we'll make sense of it in due course. Now the other thing I'm doing with this stamp, that's the Wild Poppy stamp, is where I don't want the whole stamp to be stamped out, I'm taking torn copy paper and just laying that underneath. And at the front there I just want part of the stems to show, to give a bit of contrast to the foreground of the picture. And there we are, that's the poppies. Now next up is one of my favourite stamps. This is a beautiful and very useful foliage set. I think it's designed to go down the ways, but I always use it this way for some reason. I must use it coming down. Either is very nice, but this is a great stamp for adding extra texture and contrast, and a great filler as well. It gives a bit of liveliness to the grasses in the background, and I'm now taking the darker Rainforest colour and adding the larger stamp version of the stamp to the foreground. So that's the stamping complete. Now that that's been dried off, this is the fun part where we get to colour in. So of course I'm taking the red, which is the star of the show because of the red poppies, and I'm just following the lines of the stamping and putting the red down first of all, and a deeper colour. This one happens to be like a navy blue, but black would do as well, and then the orange just at the tips for some contrast, and then blending it in again with the red, going back and forward until you're happy with the saturation of colour. And then finally picking out the edges and some of the stamping and adding a highlight, taking the green Posca pen and putting in the stems and the leaves as well, and my camera's doing that funny thing where it doesn't focus, sorry about that. Also colouring in the little buds, and all the while adding tiny highlights in yellow here and there. I'll bring you in a little bit closer so you can see that. I think my red pen needed shaking and just going over parts that needed extra colour. There we are. And I'm carrying on colouring in the little buds. I'm using a couple of colours of green and also keeping the colour of the stamping underneath here and there as well. There's a darker or a mid colour, and then finally taking the yellow and adding some little highlights on top. There we are. Now I'm just going to carry on colouring in the foreground smaller poppies, and these add a lovely contrast to the picture, and it's basic colouring in, just following the art in the stamp. Now that completes the colouring of the poppies, and you can see what a difference it makes adding touches of paint pen to the stamping, and how the pastel poppies in the background now look quite faded. And I'm carrying on with the colouring with my turquoise. Is one of my favourite colours. Again, it needs shaking. There we are. Adding a few dots of that colour onto those little foliage stamps. And this is the part that really brings it to life for me, is adding little dots of yellow here and there. And it's so interesting what this does to a picture, and you'll know from, if you follow any of my other pictures, that this is an important aspect of my finishing touches, where I'm adding little dots and dashes to bring an energy to the picture. And now I'm doing the same with white, and it is interesting how these little dots do make a difference and bring almost the picture to life. So after that was complete, I decided to take my red pastel pencil, and at the top right hand side I'm adding the impression of distant poppies by just adding lots of little lines and dashes, because I felt this area was a little bit too blank, and just fading that into the background. And finally then, for some sparkle, I've got eucalyptus in my Stickles, and I'm just randomly dabbing some little dots here and there, and of course some red for the poppies to add little highlights, not the whole poppy, just little bits to make them sparkle. And there you can see. Finally then, the picture is mounted onto a piece of black card, a white card, and then another piece of black card, just to give it a frame. And I added some of that Stickles into the water as well, you can see there. And it's all come together. So I hope you enjoyed today's project, and it gives you some ideas for your own work. Do take very good care of yourselves until next time, but above all, get creating, be brave, and enjoy the adventure.